If you plant them, they will come. So therefore, right now, one of the biggest pieces of, or one of the biggest landscape themes is edible landscape. If you plant lettuce as a really pretty, ornamental feature in your landscape, keep in mind, if you have lettuce, the rabbits are going to come. So you have to deal with that if you put those species in there. When people call us at the extension office and they say, something's eating my plants, what's the first thing we're going to ask you? What's going on? What's going on? We want to identify what's going on. It's the same with any kind of pest control. Before we make any kind of recommendation, we want to know what's causing the damage. What insect, what critter, what rodent is causing that damage. When we tell you about control of animal pests, rodents, it's always about biology and habitat. Again, just to reiterate, assess the damage, identify the species, cost of damage versus cost of management. So let's talk about this. Carolyn Allen is a Master Gardener Volunteer and a Program Assistant for Horticulture. And Carolyn, how much did you pay for that tree peony about, a few years ago, that really nice tree peony that you bought? Say it loud. She paid $80 for a tree peony. Now this is a very, very high quality, very valuable plant, beautiful plant. It's absolutely worth every penny. And she is going to go at all costs to protect that from the 9 deer that are currently living in her backyard. If you have something that's like lettuce, you just plant more, you plant extra. So you really have to look at, do I want to plant tulips in the landscape, or do I just give up and plant daffodils? And why do I say that? Rabbits, deer love tulips, daffodils are poisonous. So learning their biology, learning their habitat, and thinking about that cost of management versus the damage. The Ohio Revised Code says you cannot hire yourself out to trap an animal for somebody else. So unless, if your neighbor says, hey, will you do this for me, and they pay you to do it, you cannot do that without a license. So you must have a license. So many times we're going to recommend that you go to a licensed pest control operator for many of these critters, because they have the license to not only trap, but also to remove from the property and to euthanize that particular pest. So moles are on the left, voles are on the right. People get them confused. There's a big difference between them. Moles with them are insectivores. So they eat worms, beetles, and grubs. They have a very unique, only a mother would love appearance, because they are not very pretty. They have this long pointed snout. They have extreme paws, and they have a naked snout and no external ears. Our most common species in Ohio is the eastern mole. That's the one we tend to have the majority of. A vole with a V, vole, plant material, vegetation. They do not eat earthworms, they do not eat grubs, they eat your plants. So they like the vegetation. Looks like a mouse with smaller ears, stocky body, and we have 4 species, or 4 common species in Ohio, but the meadow and woodland vole are the most common. This is their feeding tunnel, just right below the soil surface. These volcanic mounds are their burrows. So whenever you see those piles of soil, they're going deeper, and they tend to go deeper to have their young, and they tend to go deeper in order to survive through the winter. So it's a little bit better the deeper they go. This is an example from my backyard. Look at the size of that paw, that hand. That's almost an inch in terms of the width, and the nails are just fierce on that. And it's about 6 inches from, if I stretch them out, it'd be about 6 inches from tail to nose. They excavate in the spring and fall. 6 to 24 inches would be their deeper tunnels. When you see these feeder runs on the top, that's where they're just going out searching for food. So they're going out, they're locating what they can, then they're coming back and they're staying in the deeper tunnels at night. This is really interesting. Consumes 3 to 4 times body weight daily. Sometimes you may only have 3 to 5 moles per acre. They're very territorial. So you may think you have a ton of them, and that might be one family working on that entire area. So you don't have a lot of them, you may have just 3 to 5. So we've got trapping, we've got repellents, and we've got toxic base, and we do have fumigation. So we can go back to the Caddyshack era and do some fumigation again. Now, trapping in itself is really, really important in terms of how you do it. How many of you have successfully trapped a mole? Successfully. How many of you have tried many times and not been successful? It's very, very challenging because you have to do it just right. They're smart. I got to say, they're smart. So there's different types. There's the harpoon, scissor, choker, the ones that harpoon them and kill them. They're all good, all are lethal, but you've got to do it right. So now's the time to do it. And what you need to do is place the traps in active runways, which means If you are working on getting rid of your moles, today when you go home, you're going to go around and you're going to tramp and taunt and stomp and step on every single runway that's in your landscape. Because you've got to find where they're working. They don't work the entire landscape. So I've got 5 acres, they're primarily in the front yard. That's maybe about 2 acres. We've got to go through, and now they've kind of crept out of the lawn, so now it's getting serious. So I've got to go out and make sure we step down every single one. If I don't get them all, I'm not going to know the next morning when I go out to see where that is raised again, where they're actively working. So the repellents, the noisemakers, the juicy fruit gum, they won't eat juicy fruit gum, they don't like any gum. Those things don't work. So I tell people, don't waste your money on them. But then somebody says, well, I used juicy fruit gum and I got rid of them. How do you know it's the juicy fruit gum that did the trick? Because research shows that juicy fruit doesn't work. It was likely the cats or the dogs or the coyotes or whatever else is in the area that's a predator that got rid of them. So these, through research, we know the repellents aren't mole control issues here. Fumigation is legal, but not by you guys, unless you have a license. You have to have a license to do this in A1 Pest Control and the pest control operators here in the county and other counties. They all have licenses. Voles are incredibly cyclic. Their populations, Stan talked today about populations going up and down. In the pest world, in the insect world, we see populations going up and down, rising and falling, just depending on the season, the year, and so forth. With insects, we see a rise in population, and then we see a rise in predators. And then the population of bad guys decreases, and then what happens to the population of predators after the bad guys decrease? They crash because they don't have any food. So this is the same thing with your vole biology. Average densities vary in Canada, Illinois, all over the country, and they might have 1 to 5 litters per year. Now here's your damage. Remember I said they eat plant material and roots, so they will kill plants. The only way a mole tends to kill a plant is if it's feeding underneath it and it pops it out of the ground to the point where the roots are exposed to the air. They will chew and gnaw on the bark, and it's suspected that they're gnawing on the bark for moisture, get some moisture. Also vegetation for food, but they will just gnaw on the bark. Now a little bit of gnawing is not a big deal, but a gnawing to the point of where they girdle the plant is a problem. So what are your management options? Well, you can see the screening as one, and I gotta tell you, in most all wildlife cases, exclusion is going to be the end-all, be-all, do-all, most effective type of control that you could use. If you can afford it, number one, and also if you get it out there in the right time. You can also use plain old mouse traps at the mouth of the tunnels, near their holes, near their burrows. That will help take care of them as well. And really, the baiting, we didn't do anything else but the baiting and the habitat modification, and that did a really good job. Now, zinc phosphate is one of the toxic baits, restricted use, so you would hire somebody. Voles are a tremendous problem in orchards. They'll feed, just devastate the bottom of an apple tree, or young apple trees especially. Same thing with Christmas tree growers. So if you have your pesticide applicator's license, you can get this. If not, you can go to the hardware stores, to the garden centers, and they would have a vole bait that would be safe to use then. But my big take-home message is follow label instructions. Deer, we know what deer damage is. White-tailed deer, that didn't show up in this one either. But what's this one? I heard it, rabbit, yes. And unlike Stan, I don't go around poking in poop. But this is rabbit pellets. This is a clear identifier if you have rabbit problems. So if you see their rabbit turds, a very good identifier that you've got rabbits in the area. And of course we all know the rabbit tracks in the winter, the little scurry bunny tails. Very easy to tell rabbit damage, especially on woody material. Now herbaceous material, lettuce and that kind of stuff, they just eat completely to the ground. But when you get woody material like this, they make a perfect slanted cut all the time on woody material. So this is the eastern cottontail rabbit. And again, oh, look at the bunny, isn't that cute? Well, no, not really. They're very adaptable. They, of course, we know they multiply like crazy. They concentrate in favorable habitats, and their food sources are available anywhere. So again, if you plant it, they will come. We have a lot of landscape plants that they love. Very, very important, habitat modification. I'm going to struggle with this because we have a big brush pile, and we have a big compost pile, and we have a big debris pile. We've got plenty of space for all this, so it's just something we're going to do. So we know we're going to have rabbits. So if you get rid of brush piles, things like that, they can't survive. So eliminating their habitat, removing their shelter is one way of managing them. 2-foot chicken wire fence goes up around the entire garden right at the beginning of the season. 3 feet high, the mesh, a little bigger than that because this is not Photoshop, this is truly a picture. So basically you're trying to exclude them. Groundhog, whistle pig, gopher, call them what you want, but they are extremely damaging and very, very frustrating. They will dig very large holes and they will eat your plants and your vegetables. So groundhog, woodchuck, etc. So this is an example. You'll see the mounds. You'll see the rather large holes. The nests are down in here. This is where they live. Trapping season starts here shortly, and they get trapped clear up to the end of September. They have their babies right now, February, January, this time of the year, they have their babies. So the time to get them is before they have their babies if possible. So where we're putting our new gardens at Snyder Park, we had a lot of groundhogs near our Victory Garden. Now, there are rules, and it's very important that you use a certified trapper or somebody who has a license. No more than 3 feet away from the hole for the body gripping trap. You have to have a closure or structure to prevent other animals from getting in, and tag and name and address and so forth, and check every 24 hours. And we checked for the pest control company. We checked. If we'd find one in there every day, we'd call them and they'd take them away. You cannot, again, trap rabbit, squirrels, raccoon, woodchuck, skunk, possum, beaver, coyote, fox without a license if you're doing it for hire. So I'm sure probably many of you aren't planning on doing it for hire, but if you're going to do that, you have to have a license. However, you have to know what you can do once it's trapped. So if you are using traps on your own property, like for rabbits, you need to know what you have to do with them. And with squirrels and rabbits, you can relocate or euthanize. With raccoon, skunk, possum, coyote, you have to euthanize or release back to the property. You cannot relocate them. But if you go to the DNR, Department of Natural Resources website, Nuisance Wildlife, there's a whole list of licensed trappers. What are we looking at here in terms of damage? What? Man, somebody really knows that. They're really irritated by squirrels. Chipmunks, but they are in the squirrel family. Ground squirrels, cute little boogers, aren't they? Except when they eat our food, and they don't necessarily eat. They sometimes gnaw and chew and just destroy. Same thing with the whistle pigs. At our Victory Garden, our vegetable garden, they really didn't eat a lot, but they'd come down in the winter squash and they would just gnaw on it and move enough of the outside skin, remove it to the point where it really couldn't be used in the food bank, so we'd have to get rid of it. But they weren't eating it, they were just really destroying it. So chipmunks are kind of the same thing. Chipmunks, rat poisons that are labeled for chipmunks, but once again reiterate, dogs, cats, and so forth. Fumigants, but again, they're restricted use, you have to have a license. Repellents, live traps, and I found the best success with live traps is to use baits, peanut butter. They love peanut butter, and if you mix peanut butter and grains like oatmeal, they really like that, so it works. Now we have squirrels. Anybody deal with squirrels? Squirrels don't really, again, do a lot of damage. They're a nuisance. If you have bird feeders, they are miserable. They will steal, fight, and you can buy every kind of squirrel-proof bird feeder out there available, and they still seem to figure out a way to get to those squirrel feeders, right? The thing with squirrels is, if they have a nest and they have babies, they will do anything to get back to that nest. Mice are annoying, but mice will get into your vegetable garden. This is a definite habitat modification. If you have, these are potatoes that were right above ground level, you can see. And voles, by the way, love sweet potatoes too. They will destroy sweet potatoes. But they'll just chew on them, and I've had mice chew on lower hanging tomato fruits. So they will feed on your vegetables if you have trouble. Biggest issue here, again, is habitat modification. We love wildlife, and those of us who are animal lovers, we don't want to see anything happen to wildlife. However, on the other hand, we love plants too. And we need to cohabitate with these pests that we're dealing with. So what you want to do is try to figure out, what are my tolerances? What are my limits? Other web resources for some of the wildlife we're talking about, lots of good resources available.